Good evening and welcome to the Regional Municipality of Wood Buffalo Virtual Community Town Hall. Thank you for taking the time to learn about our region's response to COVID-19. I'm Jillian McDonald, your moderator for today's call. Our panelists for tonight's Town Hall include Mayor Don Scott, Scott Davis, the RMWB's Director of Emergency Management, our Member of Parliament for Fort McMurray Cold Lake, David Yerdega, Jamie Doyle, the municipality's Chief Administrative Officer, Kevin Weidleck, the President and CEO of Wood Buffalo Economic Development Corporation, Kareem Zarifa, the Executive Director of the Oil Sands Community Alliance, Simon Younger, Vice President of Production for Imperial Oil, and Chantel Beaver, Executive Director for Fuse Social. Mayor Don Scott is going to have some opening remarks, followed by our Director of Emergency Management, then our Member of Parliament, David Yerdega. If you want to ask a question of one of our panelists, please hit *3 on your phone and you will be directed to an operator who will take your question. Now I would like to turn the floor over to Mayor Don Scott.
I'd like to begin by thanking everyone who is following the health advisory guidelines and keeping themselves safe. That is the best way that we are going to get through this pandemic. So thank you for that. I'd like to begin, though, by offering condolences to all those impacted by the tragic events that occurred in Nova Scotia. I'd also like to begin by acknowledging this call is taking place on Treaty 8 and unceded Métis territory. And this is the beginning of Ramadan, so I'd like to wish our Muslim neighbors a peaceful and safe Ramadan. And many thanks to David Yerdega, our MP, who's joining us tonight, and you can ask him questions by hitting the buttons that were just described, and he'll be able to answer some of the questions from a federal perspective. So it's the first time that David's joined us, and we're very honored to have him with us.
Thank you, Mayor Scott. Now our Director of Emergency Management, Scott Davis.
Thank you, Mayor Scott. Good evening, everyone. Earlier this afternoon, Alberta's Chief Medical Officer announced that there are now 3,720 confirmed COVID-19 cases in Alberta, including 150 in the North Zone. The province's geospatial online map is reporting 9 active cases in Fort McMurray and 0 outside of the urban service area of Fort McMurray. There have been 4 recovered cases in Fort McMurray and 2 outside of the urban service area. As you know, there's been an outbreak at Curl Oil Sands Project, and any worker that was at the site prior to April 16th must self-isolate for 14 days. Outbreak procedures and control measures continue to be implemented. I'd like to recognize our industry partners for the work they're doing to keep our community safe, and for joining us tonight to provide more information and answer your questions. I know learning of the new confirmed cases can be stressful for many, but I want to assure you that our region continues to be well positioned to deal with these cases. Earlier today, the province announced that over 117,835 tests have been done. Alberta has the highest testing rate per capita across the country, and AHS is committed to sharing the names and locations of facilities experiencing COVID-19 outbreaks, as being aware of active cases is always better than the alternative. With these factors at play, we know that the number of confirmed cases and outbreaks in our region will increase. It is to be expected. We've been planning for it, and we are prepared. We are closely working with AHS and many other agencies, organizations, and community partners to prevent the spread and keep our community safe. But don't forget, we all have a role to play. Now is not the time to let your guard down. We must continue to follow public health orders and guidelines and take care of ourselves. Wash your hands, cover your cough, and don't touch your face. Stay home when you can and stay 2 meters away from others. You can find local COVID-19 information on the RMWB website, including the support available in the Wood Buffalo region. I'd like to end my remarks by thanking all the first responders, frontline workers, and individuals performing the essential work needed to keep our region safe and moving forward. I'd also like to thank all those of you that are tuning in tonight to stay informed so you can stay safe. Together, we are flattening the curve. I'd now like to turn it back to our moderator, Jillian, to facilitate questions you may have.
Thank you, Scott. Before we get started on questions, we're going to ask our Member of Parliament, David Yerdega, to give some opening remarks. David?
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well considering the pandemic and the economy. I also like to thank Mayor Don Scott and Council and the municipality for having these very important weekly virtual community town halls. I think people appreciate it more than that we realize. Plus, a huge thank you to all the essential workers for their amazing efforts during these challenging times. The Government of Canada has introduced various programs for individuals, businesses, seniors, and various sectors across Canada. These much-needed programs have a few issues, and public feedback helps resolve some of these oversights. Looking forward to the questions and/or comments later on tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yurdega. Now we're going to turn to our question queue. Again, if you would like to ask a question of one of our panelists, please press *3 on your phone and you will be connected to an operator. Let's begin. Our first question comes live on the line from Joseph. Joseph, your line is open. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, it's very clear that we still don't know a whole lot about this virus. So when are we going to make it compulsory in our region for everybody to wear face mask? In terms of you don't give service or you don't receive service if you don't wear face mask.
Thank you so much for your question, Joseph. Our Director of Emergency Management, Scott, will take that.
Thank you, Joseph, and I appreciate your concern with masks. At present, the Alberta Health Services hasn't mandated the use of masks, and my recommendation would be to follow their guidance because that's based on science. So at this point, no compulsory masks are required.
Thank you so much, Scott. Again, *3 on your phone if you wish to ask a question of one of our panelists. Our next question comes from Donnie. Donnie asks, when will we be opening up for business again? Mayor Scott, maybe you could start a conversation about that, and then maybe Scott and possibly Kevin could weigh in.
Yeah, I'd love to give you an answer because that's something that we're already seeing happen a little bit in other provinces. They're at least putting out dates and a plan. I think we're a ways away from that yet. When the Premier has spoken, he's indicated that the peak of this pandemic is going to be sometime in May, probably mid-May to late May. So sometime after that, I think we're going to start seeing things open up again. But to be frank, I don't think anyone knows. The sooner we get through this pandemic, the sooner we follow all the guidelines, the quicker we're going to get through this, the quicker we're going to be able to open business up. And I can tell you that's something that we all want to see.
Thank you, Mayor Scott. And now Scott Davis.
Thank you for your question, and I concur with the comments by Mayor Scott. The concern I have with background in public health and emergency management is history has shown and proven fact that back in 1918 with the Spanish flu, reopening businesses too soon and communities too soon, the second wave came back, and in some communities in the States were actually more deaths from the second wave than the first wave. So we want to do the right thing.
Thank you. And Kevin?
Yes, thank you, Jill, and Mayor and Scott. It should also point out that there are businesses still operating. The public health restrictions have identified specific businesses that must close and also provided guidelines for those businesses that can remain open. So some businesses are obviously functioning now. Obviously, the level and volume of work and activity that's taking place is dramatically decreased. But I would encourage the residents of the region to consider using the services that are offered, obviously respecting the health restrictions, but of those businesses that are operating, especially things like food delivery services and things of that nature.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Again, *3 on your phone if you wish to ask a question of one of our panelists. Our next question comes from Simone. Simone asks if Kevin can talk about some of the things that the Economic Task Force is working on. Will there be rent deferral for businesses? Kevin, could you take that?
Yes, thank you. So the larger part of what the task force is working on, we've developed some recommendations. We'll share a couple of those early recommendations with council at the upcoming council meeting. With regards to the specific question around tax deferral, so I do want to emphasize, so the task force is a group that provides recommendations to Wood Buffalo Economic Development, and then we share those same recommendations with the council for consideration, and also with other organizations that might be affected by those recommendations. So as far as tax deferrals go, et cetera, that's really the auspices of the city of the municipality, as in the council and the administration, to consider. We are looking at perhaps action on the tax file that we would suggest as a recommendation, but it's really the bailiwick of the council and administration to look at.
Thank you, Kevin. Again, *3 on your phone if you wish to ask a question of one of our panelists. Our next question comes from Nick. Nick asks, what are companies doing to stop the spread with transferring workers from Curl site to other sites? Simon, could you address this, please?
Yeah, thanks very much, Jill, and thanks, Nick. I'd just like to start by saying what I said last week, which is to reiterate that there's really nothing more important to us than the safety and health of our workforce and our communities, and this remains our priority as we work through this. And I can tell you that we continue to take this situation at Curl extremely seriously, and we're working tirelessly to do everything that we possibly can to prevent the spread of COVID-19. I'd also say we're coordinating very closely with the AHS. We're in contact with them continuously. And this week, in cooperation with the AHS, we conducted on-site testing for all of our workforce. And as of this afternoon, we had tested more than 1,500 people. So that's one of the probably most significant current strategies that we have to mitigate and control the spread of the virus. As I outlined last week when I spoke, we've also had a number of very stringent measures in place since early March to ensure the safety of our team, including significantly reducing the number of employees that we have on site, daily screening of all employees, pre-travel access questionnaires and temperature screening at our flight centres and at our gate, enhanced cleaning and sterilisation, enforcing physical distancing on our flights and transportation means, and also in the workplace at site and in our camps. So, and we've continued to further strengthen those controls. And for example, this week we have adjusted our rotation schedule to ensure that all workers can comply with the various provincial requirements for isolation that have arisen this past week and through the course of this week. So a number of very stringent and comprehensive measures to ensure that we mitigate and protect as much as we can against the spread of the virus.
Thank you so much for that response, Simon. Again, *3 on the phone if you wish to ask a question of one of our panelists. Our next question comes live on the line from Jim. Jim, your line is open. Please go ahead.
Hi, I would like to know if there's a guideline for how many customers should be allowed in a retail store at one time, depending upon the size of the store.
Thank you so much for your question, Jim. Scott Davis will take that.
Thank you, Jim, for your question. And that's a complicated answer in that, as you've pointed out, the square footage of a facility certainly can impact that. Working with public health inspectors and bylaw, we're encouraging business owners to focus on maintaining physical distancing. And touring a number of businesses in the region, what I've noticed is that some have developed arrows on the floors for direction, as well as putting in lines for up at cash, keeping people in 6-foot distances, and I continue to thank them for doing that. So the answer is that we all should be doing the right thing and honoring each other's physical distancing. And thanks.
Thank you so much, Scott. Again, *3 on your phone if you wish to ask a question of one of our panelists. Our next question comes live on the line from Billy Joe. Billy Joe, your line is open. Please go ahead. Billy Joe, your line is open. Please go ahead. Okay, we seem to have lost Billy Joe, so I'll ask the question. Fort Chipewyan, what does our municipality have in place if we do end up in a pandemic situation? Scott, could you take that first, please? And then Mayor, I believe you might have some remarks.
Thank you, Billy Joe, for your question. And it's complicated in Fort Chipewyan because we've got First Nation partners we're working with as well as the Hamlet side. So I'm going to suggest that in our response, we've got Alberta Health Services as well as we have First Nations and Inuit Health Branch that we're working with and Noonie Health. In addition to that, Alberta Emergency Management Agency has dedicated field officers for both the municipal and the First Nations. So we have a number of resources that we can pull together and work to resolve this.
And Mayor Scott?
Just to supplement that, there's a Monday evening call among the Indigenous leadership in Fort Chipewyan, and all the issues are brought out and discussed. A recent issue that's been discussed is the curfew that made the news recently, but there are many other issues. So there's a good dialogue happening. Two of our councillors are from Fort Chipewyan, and they're very dialed into what's happening up there. And I expect that, as events unfold, we'll be taking additional steps. But each time a request is made, we take a hard look at it to see what the municipality can do from our perspective. We're obviously working with them, 3 other levels of government, the Indigenous governments, and obviously the federal government has a strong interest in there because it's one of their, it's federal land up there that's also in play. But we're going to do everything we can to make sure that Fort Chipewyan stays safe.
Thank you so much, Mayor Scott and Scott. Our next question comes live on the line from Shirley. Shirley, your line is open. Please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Oh, okay, thank you. I've heard a rumor that City Council may be voting on locking down the community of Fort McMurray, meaning no travel into and out of unless you're, unless it's food or medication or whatever, I don't know. But for somebody like myself to travel in and out of, I heard, is there any substance to this rumor? Is City Council considering locking down the community?
Thank you for your questions, Shirley. Mayor Scott will take that.
Hi, Shirley. It's just a rumor. It's definitely not happening. The GOA, the Government of Alberta, has indicated to us that we have no authority to block the Highway 63. So that highway is provincial responsibility, and the only ones who could make a decision to block that highway or to put up a roadblock or to do anything else, restrict access, would be the provincial government. Council has no authority on it.
Thank you, Mayor Scott. Our next question comes live on the line from Jeremiah. Jeremiah, your line is open. Please go ahead.
Hi. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead with your question, please.
So I was just wondering about leaving Alberta and coming back from other provinces, if there's any restrictions yet in air or on ground traveling in a vehicle, right? And that's it.
Thank you for your question, Jeremiah. Our Director of Emergency Management, Scott Davis, will take that.
Thank you for your question, and certainly I can understand the concern. At present, no, AHS as well as Alberta Emergency Management has not invoked any restrictions on travel between provinces.
Thank you, Scott. Again, *3 on your phone if you wish to ask a question of our panelists. Our next question comes live on the line from Joel. Joel, your line is open. Please go ahead.
Yes,
Joel.
good evening.
Go ahead with your question.
Yes, I'd like to first say thank you for taking the time to answer my question. I honestly, the reason for my question here is I am working for a subcontractor for one of the oil sands, and due to the whole pandemic, we have been put in a different kind of schedule where we just come in for perhaps 3, 4 days, 5 days at most, and then we're off for like 10 or 12 days, just so we can, come back for the next shutdown. So here's my question. Because of the still paychecks that I'm receiving, and thankfully I am, it's not enough to pay the rent, the vehicle, diapers for my kid, food for my family. Would I be, as much as anybody else, eligible to receive some of that relief fund?
Thank you for your question, Joel. Our Member of Parliament, David Yerdega, would you be able to take that one?
Yes, I can take that one. No, it's very trying times, and thank you for asking the question, and that question has been asked numerous times. The best advice I can give you right now is, depending on how much you make and everything else, I would recommend that you phone our office because it's a private concern, and you can call our Fort McMurray office at 780-743-2201. There's possibly some funding, but we need more information to see what funding is available to you, depending on what your monthly salary is.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yerdega. Would you be able to repeat those phone numbers just to make sure everybody got that?
Okay, do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it's 780-743-2201.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Again, *3 on your phone if you wish to ask a question of one of our panelists. Our next question comes live on the line from Jaden. Jaden, your line is open. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much. I was just wondering, what can we do as individuals for people who are not following the 6 feet distance and are asked to give some space for individuals? What can we as individuals do to tell them kind of nicely to back off with, and them getting angry with us? I had an incident where I was spat on at Superstore because this guy him and his wife wouldn't give us space. We were trying to locate him, but we can't find him. What can we do to prevent an incident like that?
Thank you for your question, Jaden. Scott Davis, our Director of Emergency Management, will take that one.
Thank you, Jaden. Certainly that's a tough one, and I noticed as I visited different businesses, while the businesses tend to give guidance on distancing, often individuals aren't complying with that. And I guess all I can ask is that you have patience, choose not to engage in those people, because confrontation doesn't win the battle, patience does.
Thank you so much, Scott. Again, *3 on your phone if you would like to ask a question from one of our panelists. Our next question comes from Riley. Riley asks, how can people help? Can we volunteer anywhere? Chantel Beaver from View Social, would you be able to take this question?
Absolutely. Thank you for your question. Any act of volunteerism done safely can make a huge difference. It'll be up to each organization, I guess, to decide when or how they believe volunteers are able to get engaged in their organization. The positions are generally posted on wbvolunteers.ca. That's wbvolunteers.ca. I know currently there are listings for emergency social services as well as the soup kitchen. They are looking for volunteers throughout all of this. And we know that we've heard from different frontline workers and agencies where they're looking for people who can sew mask or scrub bags, provide meals, picking up groceries for those who can't leave their homes and things like that. I think the one thing that our sector would ask is that all organizations would ask that the public does have patience. We've been forced to refocus our efforts and practice safety first as just as anyone else. And as grateful as we are for our community support, and our community sure is one of the most supportive I've ever been a part of, we don't always see those Facebook tags, and sometimes responding to the emails means we're not serving the clients. So bear with us, but if you do wish to volunteer, please reach out to Fuse Social or visit that website.
Thank you so much, Chantel. Again, *3 on your phone if you would like to ask a question of one of our panelists. Our next question comes live on the line from Sean. Sean, your line is open. Please go ahead.
Hi there, everybody. How are we?
Doing great.
Hello?
How are you this evening?
Oh, not too bad. My question is, in regards to the new information we have that came from Syncrude, and of course with what happened at Curl, what sort of measures are health officials taking to, I guess, make sure that the companies themselves are following social distancing rules and stuff? Like, is there anybody going out to those sites to ensure that?
Thank you for your question, Sean. Our Director of Emergency Management, Scott Davis, will take that.
Hi, Sean. Thank you for your question. I do know that Alberta Health Services is working with our industrial partners, and there was a guidance document that came out of the province that was well vetted and provides some good information. I also know that at the different sites, AHS has engaged with our partners, and they have a 3-step method where they go in and there's a team that looks at the current situation, looks for better ways to encourage following the guidelines from AHS, and working with education with both leadership and the employees, as well as looking at methods that can change the way they do business and supporting those guidance.
Thank you for that, Scott. Kareem Zarifa of the Oil Sands Community Alliance, do you have anything that you could add about precautions that are being put in place in the oil sands?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Sean. I guess since last week, AHS struck up a industrial work camp group. So many of my members participate in that, and that's facilitated by AHS. As well, some new developments since last week. The federal government provided some guidance to the aviation sector that masks are mandatory. So that's another strategy that's been put in place. But again, to reiterate some of the things that Simon touched on, all workers, local or not, and whether traveling by road or air, go through a screening procedure before entering site. And that's either in the form of a questionnaire or a temperature check. And then workers staying in the lodges are given daily screenings with temperature monitoring.
Thank you so much for that response, Kareem. Again, *3 on your phone if you wish to ask a question of one of our panelists. Like previous town halls, we will be asking that you help us out by participating in a poll this evening. First, we want to thank the thousands of participants who tune into our town halls week in and week out. Our next town hall is scheduled for next Thursday, April 30th at 5:50 p.m. So for tonight's poll, with May just around the corner, we would like to know your thoughts about how often we should hold the town halls. As the COVID-19 pandemic continues, what is the frequency that you would like to see these town halls continue? Press 1 for weekly. Press 2 for once every 2 weeks. Press 3 for once a month. Press 4 for whenever the RMWB feels that it is necessary. Press 5 for we don't need to continue with the town halls. Again, as the COVID-19 pandemic continues, what is the frequency that you would like to see these town halls continue? Press 1 for weekly. Press 2 for once every 2 weeks. Press 3 for once a month. Press 4 whenever the RMWB feels that it is necessary. Press 5 for we don't need to continue with the town halls. Again, *3 on your phone if you would like to ask a question of one of our panelists. Our next question comes live on the line from Peter. Peter, your line is open. Please go ahead.
My question is, with the people at Brooks and that other meatpacking plant, there's one chicken and one meat around Calgary. Can I catch COVID, the virus, from eating meat that they have touched, seeing how they tested positive? Or is the meat safe and the chicken safe? I hope it is, but I think it's a relevant question. Apparently they said there was only 3 and then 12, and now they say it's up to over 300 people that were that tested positive that were around those meatpacking plants. So if you could, I wouldn't mind an answer to that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question, Peter. Our Director of Emergency Management, Scott Davis, will take that.
Thank you, Peter, and very good question, and I share your concern. While AHS are the experts when it comes to public health, I do know from my experience in public health in Ontario that, as with any pathogen, ensuring that any meat is properly stored under proper temperatures and following best before dates, and then take a look at how you're properly handling the meat as you unpack it and prepare it for cooking to prevent the transmission of pathogens. And finally, the most important factor is ensuring that you have the internal minimum cooking temperatures for that product, whether it's chicken, beef, or pork. And if you maintain those and handle properly, I think you'll be safe.
Thank you so much, Scott. Again, *3 on your phone if you would like to ask a question of one of our panelists. Our next question is anonymous. Anonymous asks, is it possible to reduce the passengers on the bus? Keeping 2-meter distance is impossible. Jamie, could you discuss this from a municipal perspective? And then after that, Kareem, will have you talk about that from an industry perspective. Jamie, please go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. Currently, we're monitoring the social distancing on buses with not only digital signage when buses are full in the front of the buses, but also posters and marked seats on the bus. We understand it can be difficult to monitor each and every bus at all times and each and individual rider. However, we are, where we can. If you see instances where it's being not enforced, please call the Pulse line, 743-7000, and let us know.
Thank you, Jamie. And Kareem, could you talk about it from an industry perspective, please?
Sure. Thanks, Anonymous, for the question. We continue to run the coach buses and stagger the seating. I guess the one thing that's changed since the last town hall is that some of the companies are now implementing masks as well.
Thank you so much, Kareem. Again, *3 on your phone if you wish to ask a question of one of our panelists. Our next question comes live on the line from Marianne. Marianne, your line is open. Please go ahead.
Thank you for taking my question. I have 2 questions. I'd like to know if the school zone is still in effect when school during the week, 5 days a week, because I know the teachers are still in school, but the students are not. And my second question is, if you're not from the same house, are they fining people when they work in the same place, but they're traveling?
Marianne, could you reiterate your second question? I'm just having a hard time understanding what you're asking.
Okay, so my question is, I heard that you have to be from the same house, which we are, but we're traveling together in the vehicle. But I'd like to know if another passenger is allowed to come with us when we work in the same place.
Perfect. Thank you so much for explaining that. The first question, we will go to Jamie, our CAO, for the school speed zones.
Thank you, Jill, and thank you for the question. The school zones, they're only enforced when school is in during school hours. The playground zones are enforced still. Now, keep in mind, I wouldn't suggest ripping through school zones just because they're not enforced, but that's how it is now.
Marianne, I'm just going to see if we can have somebody answer that second question that you asked. I have it here, and I will come back to it here in a second, just so that you know, and we will get back to you on that one. The next question comes live on the line from David. David, your line is open. Please go ahead.
Hello. Question is just if the municipality has anything in place with the oil sands, if the local camps were to have an outbreak such as Curl, those camps are accessible by vehicles.
Thank you so much for your question, David. Kareem, would you be able to address this?
Thanks, David. Jill, I'm not quite sure what the question is.
I can repeat it for you.
Sure.
So David asked if there's anything in place for any of the surrounding camps around Curl Lake should they develop COVID. So if there's a plan in place moving forward.
Okay, sure. So I think I might have mentioned this at the first town hall. So all of our members, based on provincial regulations, have pandemic plans in place and are in constant contact with Alberta Health Services. So the process, though, once a case has been identified at site, Alberta Health Services, the team at Alberta Health Services works directly with the company that has identified cases and works to ensure that they have the resources they need to work through their pandemic plans.
Thank you, Kareem. Simon Younger of Imperial Oil, would you happen to have any additional comments on that?
Well, Jill, I would just point to the same controls and mitigations that I mentioned earlier around, particularly people travelling from outside, either via air or via road to the camp, and all of the very strict monitoring, questionnaires, temperature monitoring, social distancing, use of masks that Kareem has mentioned are all in place and I would say strictly and rigorously enforced. And then also, as Kareem mentioned, the camps themselves have very comprehensive pandemic plans that now through time the AHS has worked very closely on with them. I can certainly, in the cases of our camps, I can certainly confirm that. So it's a very comprehensive preparedness and contingency program that is in place.
Thank you so much for your responses, gentlemen. As promised, Marianne, I am back with an answer, I believe, for your question. So the question was, are people allowed to be traveling in the same vehicle if they don't live together? Scott, could you take that, please?
Thank you for your question. And unfortunately, AHS wasn't available to join us tonight, so I'm going to do my best to answer this one. Looking at the vehicles and people that are traveling together, what my hope would be is that even though there's not guidance from AHS on this, that people do the right thing. If you feel you have the symptoms, then no, you shouldn't be traveling with somebody that isn't in the same family. And for that matter, if you do have symptoms, you shouldn't be leaving the house. So I would encourage all of us to do the right thing, and if we feel we have symptoms, don't be traveling with others.
Thank you, Scott. Again, star 3 on your phone if you would like to ask a question of one of our panelists this evening. Our next question comes live on the line from Debbie. Debbie, your line is open. Please go ahead.
Hi. I'm asking primarily about the dog parks. As a dog owner up here of 2 dogs and someone who uses the dog parks quite regularly, it's pretty frustrating right now that we can't use them. And I know other municipalities are actually just taking the gates off so people don't have to touch anything. I think we have to trust each other that we're not going to come within that 6 meter or 6 foot distance. Is there anything that we can do to accommodate the thousands of us up here that own dogs?
Thank you so much for your question, Debbie. Jamie will take this.
Thank you, Jill, and thank you, Debbie, for the question. One of the issues with the dog parks is they become very full very quick, and the ability to social distance becomes very difficult. I'm not aware of any other communities that have opened their dog parks, so if you could send the ones that you know of to townhall@rmwb.ca, we'll certainly look into it. I know that Edmonton's still closed for their dog parks, so it's something we continually monitor, and of course, as always, we take guidance from our AHS partners.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Again, *3 on your phone if you wish to ask a question. We've had many online questions come in, so I'm going to try to get to a few of them now. Our next question comes from Addie. Addie asks, I own a business and I am not paying myself. Therefore, I do not receive a T4. I do pay tax on my business income. In order to get government assistance, I need a T4. What can I do? I'm going to ask our Member of Parliament, David Yerdega, to take that one. David, are you still on the line?
How's that? You hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, so they did change some of the qualifications for that when we were talking about the T4s. So if you go to my website, it goes through the government website. They'll show the new qualifying factors. So you can either go online or you can call my office. Which, if you want do you have my number?
Go ahead and say that number for us.
Okay, it's 780-743-2201.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yerdega. Again, *3 on your phone if you wish to ask a question. Our next question comes from Michael. Michael asks, how are the taxi drivers maintaining distance with passengers? Scott, could you discuss this?
Thank you for your question. And as I understand it, taxi drivers are trying to educate their passengers and trying to maintain that distance with barriers that are in place and ensuring that there's no more than one passenger per vehicle, except in the instances where additional passengers are members of the same household or individuals in close personal relationship or a required caregiver.
Thank you so much for that response. Again, *3 on your phone if you would like to ask a question. We've got another question here from Trevor. Trevor asks, how many businesses have closed since this has begun, and what is being done to stop more businesses from failing? Kevin Weidlich of our Economic Development Corporation will take that on.
So the stats on business closures, it's way too early in the game to have any sort of meaningful numbers at a regional level. That will play out over weeks and months. As far as which businesses will close and which will not, that's a prediction that I don't think anybody can really truly make. We do know that the Alberta Chambers of Commerce have an estimate that perhaps 30 to 50, as many as 50% of small businesses could close, depending on the duration of the public health restrictions. Again, that'll be a function of the business strength for each business owner. That's probably the best answer that I can give you.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Again, *3 on your phone if you wish to ask a question of one of our panelists. We're getting several questions about the walking trails and why they're closed, if along the Sny, if the park is closed, and if the Clearwater River is closed. So maybe, Jamie, you can just kind of give an overview of what we've done, why we've done it.
Thank you, Jill. And it's a very good question. And as I mentioned about the dog parks, parks and playgrounds become just as congested with families and children, so it's difficult to social distance. So we want to be responsible from that respect. So that's why they're closed. The walking trails, virtual trails, for example, they're still open. Our OHV staging areas, in some respects, they're still open. Some have been closed due to river breakup, so check our website for those locations. But for the most part, people can still get out and walk through our trail system, just not access our parks.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Again, *3 on your phone if you want to ask a question of one of our panelists. Our next question comes from Randy. Randy asks, how will an outbreak be handled in Conklin? Scott, could you talk about the emergency plan for Conklin?
Thank you, Jillian, and happy birthday, by the way. Randy, great question. And as with all of our partners that we're working with, both in the rural communities and the Indigenous communities, there's a number of leaders that come together on a regular basis and work through the intricacies of First Nations as well as municipal side.
Thank you, Scott. Our next question comes from Sarah. Sarah says, for deferral of property tax, will this apply to everyone or is it voluntary for those in need? So again, Sarah asks, for deferral of property tax, will this apply to everyone or is it voluntary for those in need? Jamie, our CAO, will take that.
Thank you, Jill, and happy birthday. I didn't know it was your birthday. The property tax deferral is open for everyone. No need to apply or anything of that for that nature. Just sit tight and your property tax can be deferred. However, if you do want to pay early, you still can.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the birthday wishes, but this is about the residents tonight, so we'll move on to the next question. Our next question comes from Krista. Krista says, are the confirmed cases in our region inclusive of the individuals who tested positive and are isolating at Curl Lake Camp? Scott Davis, our Director of Emergency Management, will take that.
Thank you for your question, Krista. Normally what happens with contact tracing is we look at the cases that originated in a center, and then if they are isolating in camp, they would be included in the numbers. However, if they have their symptoms have come together when they have since gone back to their home, whether it's Calgary or another province, that case number would travel with them geographically.
Thank you so much for that, Scott. Again, *3 on your phone if you wish to ask a question. We have about 15 minutes remaining. Our next question comes from Randy. Randy says, is there a plan to keep green areas mowed and litter picking continuing? Spring weather is showing many areas in need of attention. Jamie will address that.
Thank you, Jill. Yes, we will be conducting those activities as our summer operations begins. We'll be picking up trash and still mowing green spaces.
Thank you so much for that, Jamie. Our next question comes from Alan. Alan says, I see the river looks like it's going to break up soon. With only essential services working, do we have enough resources to deal with any flooding that happens? Scott, could you take that, please?
Thank you. Great question. And yes, we're taking steps to monitor river breakup, and that includes with Alberta Environment as well as our own teams. Any response that we have, we've looked at how we can maintain the guidance from Alberta Health Services, ensuring that strategies are in place to enforce physical distancing, proper use of personal protective equipment to protect first responders and others that would help out in this incident.
Thank you so much for that, Scott. Our next question comes from Chase. Chase asks, where do I find information about mental health support? What organizations are there? Chantel from Fuse Social, perhaps you could talk a little bit about this?
Yes, thank you, Jill, and thank you, Chase, for your question. A lot of our nonprofit organizations are up and running virtually. SOS, for instance, is still operating their crisis line as well as offering mental health support online. And any further direction in terms of where to go and how to access can be obtained through contacting CMHA, who is also working remotely.
Thank you so much, Chantel. We'd also like to let residents know that if you're looking for information about federal and provincial supports, we've actually created a page on our municipal website, rmwb.ca/COVID-19. On the left-hand side, you will see support available, and we've compiled information to assist residents, First Nations, local businesses, and community organizations. Again, star 3 on your phone if you wish to ask a question of one of our panelists. Our next question comes from Dipti. Dipti says, many grocery stores are still not following AHS guidelines. Why is the RMWB not enforcing this? Scott, could you take that, please?
Thank you for your question. I'm not sure which grocery stores you're referring to, and would encourage that if you feel uncomfortable, there is at alberta.ca COVID an opportunity to report those businesses. Myself, as well as our bylaw staff, have been out visiting different businesses, and for the most part, I've been encouraged in the steps they're taking to encourage physical distancing, as well as limiting the number of patrons within their establishments.
Thank you so much, Scott. Our next question comes live on the line from Sue. Sue, your line is open. Please go ahead.
Hi. My question is for our federal minister, David, there. I'm curious if our federal government is considering using the FDA-approved drug that has been used for lupus, and it's been used quite successfully, I believe, in the States for curing COVID-19. And I'm just wondering if our federal government is thinking or even investigating the use of this to be able to cure COVID-19 for Canadians.
Thank you so much for your question, Sue. Mr. Yurdega, could you take this on, please?
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, the government is looking at it. There's some promising results happening in other countries. So I think we're just being cautious, making sure that it is going to be a benefit to use against the COVID-19. So nothing official yet, but we are looking at it as a possible treatment for the virus.
Thank you so much for your response, Mr. Yurdega. Our next question comes live on the line from Anisha. Anisha, your line is open. Please go ahead.
Was that Alicia?
Yes, please go ahead with your question.
Okay, so hi everyone, and I just have a few questions. My husband is currently considered an essential worker, and I just found out someone from Pink Road is testing positive now. So I want to know, first of all, why aren't they making masks mandatory? Because if it is, then his company is not providing any masks to wear. And the other thing is, why in the city mask is not mandatory? And my third question is, my concern on this site is commuters coming from outside the city that are working on the site, and commuters going from this city, from Fort McMurray, to work on the site. They both are working there together, right? So they might be asymptomatic, we don't know, but they might be a carrier. So why aren't we distancing either commuters work on the site, or people from the city work on the site? There has to be some kind of support, because I have kids at home and I'm concerned with my husband being an essential worker and coming in contact. So, thank you.
Thank you so much for your questions. Our first question about mandatory masks. Kareem, would you be able to address this from an industry perspective?
Sure. Thanks, Jill, and happy birthday, by the way. So, as I mentioned, last week the federal government provided guidance on mandatory mask wearing for flights for the airline industry. And as far as on-site, masks are available at some of the sites, especially when workers are working in close proximity. The other thing that I've mentioned over the past couple of town halls is that sites have been limited to only site-critical staff, which in some cases has reduced the population at site by up to 60%. So, I want to reassure the person who asked the question that we are taking, and Simon's also echoed this, aggressive measures, and we have been for the last 6 weeks.
Thank you. And Scott Davis is going to weigh in on the face masks as well.
Thank you for your question about face masks. And while AHS hasn't provided guidance, as I've understood it, on the use of face masks, it certainly is a personal choice. And there's pros and cons. If you feel comfortable wearing a mask and you feel that helps protect yourself, then that would be a move. However, I look at how the transmission occurs, and that's from droplets. The masks prevent the spread of droplets, so therefore, in my case, I would encourage the person that's got the cough to wear the mask and not myself. I'm also cognizant that our supply of masks are limited, and I'm not wanting to take them away from first responders, those that are working with the elderly, and persons that are susceptible to transmission.
Thank you, Scott. And Simon, would you happen to have any words that you'd like to weigh in on that?
Yeah, happy to, Jill. I mean, we've obviously, with the situation that we face at Curl, we've been getting a lot of help from the AHS, and in fact, we've expanded the use and wearing of masks. I completely understand and agree with everything that's already been said. I would say the AHS, as I said, has been working with us continuously and really done a fantastic job analysing the cases that we've had at site and what that means, and that's been translated through to a recommendation to expand the use of masks in certain circumstances and for certain people within certain date ranges, and so we've complied with all of that, and that's being, I think, has proven effective to continue to strengthen the mitigations that we have in place.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Again, *3 on your phone if you wish to ask a question. We're in the final minutes here, so you have just a couple of minutes to get those last-minute ones in. Our next question comes from Grady. Grady says, oil's in the toilet, and that's terrible for Fort McMurray. I'd like to know if Mayor Scott or David Yerdega has had any conversations with the Premier or the Prime Minister about how we're going to help our economy. Mayor Scott, we'll start with you.
Yeah, it's something that's very concerning to the Premier. I can tell you every conversation that I've had with the Premier, and he's done some town halls, he's met with the municipal leadership of several cities. He has talked about his concern over oil and what's happened with OPEC. So there's going to be a lot of challenges that we're going to have to overcome, and we recognize that both as a municipality, and I believe our Premier recognizes it as I can also tell you that we've been sending letters. We recently sent a letter to the federal government and the provincial government saying that our oil industry, the oil sands, needs federal support. And what we have in mind there is a line of credit for the oil industry going forward. We think there's going to be at least a year of challenges ahead, and we want to see them get as much support as possible. So yes, it's been recognized, and yes, there's lots of discussions happening. Our colleague, MP David Yerdega, may want to supplement that.
Yerdega,
Yeah,
do you have any comments?
Yes, thank you for the question, and a very important question as we see the oil prices continually drop and not even stabilizing at this moment. But the government did provide some dollars to the oil and gas industry. They're going to be cleaning up orphaned and inactive wells. They're also launching a program, $750 million to emission reduction. And that's basically all there's right now for the oil industry. The government is expanding credit for medium-sized companies so they can maintain operations and keep their employees supported. But it's challenging times, and we do talk about the oil and gas industry in committee a lot. It's a big issue, and it's going to take a lot of dollars to turn this boat around.
Thank you so much, Mr. Udega. We are on to our last question of this evening. The last question comes live on the line from Ori. Ori, your line is open. Please go ahead.
Thank you. The question is to do with the fly-in, fly-out. I'm a resident of Vancouver Island, but I've currently rented a house in Fort McMurray for the past 5 weeks. If I decided to go home and come back, coming through Calgary Airport, is there not potential contact with people coming from Krill Lake Camp? I understand they have a charter from there to Calgary, but then they hop onto other planes and they're in the other airport there with Air Canada or WestJet. Now, if we could potentially have contact with them, when I come back into Fort McMurray, would I have to self-isolate for 14 days?
Thank you so much for your question, Ori. I believe we have a few people who could probably weigh in on that. So Scott Davis, our Director of Emergency Management, will start.
Thank you for your question, and I understand your concern flying through airports and the number of touch points that could be occur there. So I would encourage you to do as much as you can to limit the possibility of transmission. So that's washing your hands as often as possible, and try to think about how, when you stop and touch something, using a hand gel or if washrooms are available, and not touching your face. But as to isolating yourself here, unless you've got symptoms yourself, I think I've got to rely on you to do the right thing and carry on your business as usual. However, if those symptoms develop, then isolate and contact AHS.
Thank you for your response, Scott. Kareem, would you happen to have anything that you could add to that?
I'm sure. Thanks, Jill, and thanks for the question. As I mentioned earlier, there are screening protocols before getting on a flight. And the flights have also reduced their capacity to enable physical distancing. And the airlines have also increased their cleaning and sanitation of the aircraft. And as I mentioned earlier, the federal government has provided guidance on the mandatory masks being worn on passenger flights.
Thank you so much. And Mayor Scott would like to weigh in.
Yeah, if there's anyone out there who's listening to this and you're somebody that flies in and out of the region, consider moving here. That is going to be good for you, good for us. We want more residents. This is a great place to live. Please consider it.
Thank you, Mayor Scott. And Simon of Imperial Oil, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Well, I certainly agree with the sentiment that Mayor Scott just expressed, and I would just say to the questioner, we completely understand the concern. It's a very valid concern, and we can appreciate why you're asking that question, and that is exactly why we're doing everything we possibly can to limit the spread of this virus, and we're working tirelessly to control the situation we have at Curl. I would just say that we are emphasising and really I would say mandating that all of our staff that we have at site are observing all of the expectations more broadly when they're at home, when they're away from site, around physical distancing and all of the various provincial and public guidelines around this. That includes when they're travelling and when they're going about their daily lives. And I think the point has been made earlier that that is the best way that we'll work our way through this situation.
Thank you so much, everyone, for weighing in on that final question this evening. That's all the time that we have for this week's Town Hall. However, before we wrap up this evening, Mayor Scott would like to say a few words. Mayor Scott?
Yes, if you didn't get your question in, make sure you email it to townhall@rmwb.ca. And we are starting a thank you campaign at the municipality. So we know there's many people in our region that are carrying out essential roles, and they're the ones who keep our community running day in and day out. So to recognize these people, the municipality has launched a thank you campaign. And residents can upload a thank you video to our website, and we'll put the thank yous together and then share it on social media. So you can learn more about that and participate by visiting rmwb.ca/thank you. That's rmwb.ca/thank you. And please participate.
Thank you so much, Mayor Scott. We recognize that due to high call volumes, you may not have had your question addressed. And as Mayor Scott said, you can send your questions to townhall@rmwb.ca. We were getting several questions this evening asking whether or not we post the recording of this town hall, and we do. We ask that you go to our website, rmwb.ca/COVID-19. We try to get those posted by the Friday following the Thursday night town hall. If you were joining us online and you would like to be added to our town hall call out, or if you would like to be removed from the call out list, please call Pulse at 780-743-7000 and provide your phone number. I'd like to thank our panelists for taking the time to engage with residents this evening. As mentioned earlier, our next town hall is 1 week from tonight, April 30th at 5:50 p.m. I also would like to say a special thank you to everyone who wished me a happy birthday. It was unexpected, and I appreciate it. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Stay safe, stay strong, and have a wonderful evening.